Welcome to Something to Talk About, which is the daily get-together here at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And if you are not yet a member of the Senior Community Center, well, you better get on it. It's just $20 a calendar year, and you can join by going to our website, biseniorcenter.org. Today, we are joined by Larry Chin, who is a Bainbridge resident with 25 years of immigration law experience, and I believe that he is currently, relatively recently, started to work with the Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, maybe formally. And we are very happy to have you here, Larry, and to learn about the work that the KIAC, Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, is doing. I know that the world has changed a little bit in the transitions of the administrations, but that doesn't mean that your work has lessened. If anything, it might be more. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you about the work that you do with KIAC. Welcome.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I am happy to meet with you and to let you know a little bit about what we do at KIAC, a bit more about myself. I've been Bainbridge Island resident for 18 years. I live on the north end of the island. Prior to joining KIAC earlier this year, I was an immigration attorney in private practice. I had an office in downtown Seattle. I still have that practice. I am in the process of winding that down as I transition to a full-time position as the Legal Services Director for Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center. We refer to it as KIAC. It's just less of a mouthful to say. Prior to joining as the Legal Services Director, I sat on the board of directors with KIAC for a good 2.5 years. I saw all the machinations. I looked at the budget issues. We worked on various legal issues and strategies. At the time, actually, I was the only immigration attorney on the board, so brought a unique insight in terms of how the organization was going to function. So for those of you unfamiliar with KIAC, we are a nonprofit organization located in East Bremerton. Our offices are off of Wheaton Way. It was started in 2009 by a gentleman named Ray Garrido and another lady named Anita Smith, both of whom are not attorneys, but through a process of accreditation have gotten the credentials to be able to represent people before the government. In Ray's case, he's fully accredited, which means that he can actually take cases to court and litigate cases up until the level of appeal with the Board of Immigration Appeals, but not beyond that. And we also operate primarily on a volunteer basis. So we have about 9 accredited reps right now. And these accredited reps help clients in our community. And these are primarily folks in Bremerton and Kitsap County. We have clients all over, including Bainbridge Island and further afield, like Jefferson County, and even down over in Shelton, Belfair. We actually have some clients down in Oregon because we took a number of different deportation cases out of the Tacoma Detention Center. And once we got those folks out, then they went home to Oregon, and we still represent them. So a little bit more about KIAC, just to give you an idea of what type of work that I do. And there's 2 parts to our house. There's the legal services side, and then there's the family services side. I'll talk a little bit about what I know most, which is the legal services side. In the past year, KIAC has done, we are an organization where we try to do everything for everyone to the extent that we can without being stretched too thin. We invariably find ourselves stretched very thin. But in the past year, I'm just trying to give you some statistics here because I just ran a report for the board recently. So if you will bear with me. In the year 2020, which was a challenging year because of COVID, we opened 275 new client matters. And of those 275 cases, 106 of them were immigration related. And I'll break down the immigration cases a little further if you want that detail. The remainder of the cases 169 were business or tax related. So we have a side of KIAC that works towards helping clients to file their federal tax returns, which we believe at KIAC is our civic duty. There's also a demonstrable benefit in terms of immigration benefits down the road. The business side of our legal program also includes helping clients to file business formation paperwork, prepare quarterly state taxes, apply for ITIN or individual tax identification numbers, which help people to file their tax returns. So there's a significant portion of our clients that we do this work for, who in turn are employers in our county, and they're hiring other people and they're paying taxes into the system and generating income and revenue for the state. And interestingly, often when clients don't have valid immigration status or valid social security numbers, a lot of the money that they pay into the system, they don't benefit from. So they may be using someone else's social security number and they get that tax withheld. And I would assume some of you folks get social security benefits.
Yeah.
And our clients, because of their lack of status, are paying into a system but get no benefit from that system. And then just in terms of our immigration cases, and we do quite a few naturalization cases. We help clients to prepare the filings, navigate sort of the very Byzantine system of going through that process. We will help them to study English, which is a requirement for naturalization. We will help them with the civics and history testing. And the day of their interview, we actually will attend the interview with them, kind of hold their hand through the process to serve as witnesses in that instance. And in the past, in 2020, we had 75 naturalization clients that we served, 25 of whom became naturalized United States citizens. And that's kind of a lag in terms of overall statistic reporting, because it often takes up to 2 years from the time of filing to the completion of that naturalization process. So it's not a fair sort of statistical balance if we were to look at the new matters open. So some of those numbers kind of reach back to the year before. We also do a number of different immigration applications, something that we do a lot of and have been doing a lot of because of a recent decision, federal court decision, is the filing of deferred action for childhood arrivals, also known as DACA. And this is a group of individuals who arrived in the United States prior to June of 2012. This is a program that was created by President Obama, and the Trump administration attempted to shut it down. The Supreme Court said no. And then a recent decision said that the Immigration Service had to accept new filings from new applicants. This group of beneficiaries are referred to as dreamers in the media. And they're often the ones that were brought here at a very young age, very much Americanized, but for the fact that they don't have immigration status here. And there are different paths for residency going forward for them, but they're very narrow. And we're hoping that changes, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're looking at for the future. We also do a number of green card replacement applications. In some instances, we also go through a process called adjustment of status for clients if they're trying to get their permanent residency here in the United States. We also help family members bring other family members from overseas. So, for example, if I'm a U.S. citizen and I meet someone abroad and I decide to get married there, and I want to bring my wife or my husband and my stepchildren, there's a process in place for that. And we certainly at KIAC assist folks as far as that's concerned. And finally, we do have a handful of cases where we are representing clients in immigration court and defending them against deportation. And this is a very sort of complex and very time-consuming practice that we have. We don't take very many of those cases. In fact, when I was on the board, one of our decisions was to stop taking those cases because it was just so labor intensive and so consumptive of our time and resources that we made a decision that we would be better served if we could extend the breadth of our services by taking administrative filings as opposed to defensive affirmative filings in the immigration court. However,
yeah, I was just going to say that it seemed as though obviously you got very involved in that at the start of the Trump administration, when there was a lot of immigration deportation efforts, and there was a lot of concern around the country, and certainly here. And I know that that there was a lot of interest among Kitsap County residents in supporting KIAC in helping people who felt endangered at that point. It seems as though the tumultuousness of immigration law the last 4 to 5 years has been probably quite extensive, and it's been hard for people like yourself to keep up with the changing rules, and certainly for the people who are most affected by those changing rules or policies.
That is true. If anyone wants to look at our Facebook postings, I posted an article recently that talked about from Commissioner Majorkis, who's the head of Homeland Security. Beg your pardon, he's the head of Citizenship and Immigration Services, and he was talking about the extensive damage that was done by the prior administration to our immigration system. And I certainly experienced that firsthand as a private practice attorney. There is a common sort of belief, I think, a sigh of relief, justifiably so, to say now that we have President Biden, that the demand isn't there, or that folks are less at risk of being removed from the United States. That is not necessarily true, because there has been no law change that allows protection for clients, for people without status at this point. And in fact, undoing some of the very harmful decisions by the prior administration puts these folks still at risk. So I'll give you an example. There is a body of law called Asylum, where if you can articulate and prove that you were being persecuted in your home country and you have a fear of return there, then you could remain here and eventually get your green card and then eventually get your citizenship. Previous to the Trump administration, there was a ruling that found that victims of domestic violence qualified as applicants for asylum. It's not to say you automatically win just because you're a victim of domestic violence. You still have to prove your case in an adversarial environment with an independent judge who makes his or her decision about the basis and validity of your claim. But previous to the Trump administration, that was a recognized particular social group for purposes of asylum. The courts had reviewed it, the appellate bodies had reviewed it, various federal courts had weighed in on this issue. So it was fairly settled law. However, the law as it's written allows the Attorney General to substitute his or her judgment for that of the courts. So this is an interesting sort of interplay between administrative law and federal practice. So then Attorney General Sessions interceded and issued a ruling. He said, I don't care what you said. I don't care what the jurisprudence is. I don't care what the courts say. I'm saying that if you are a victim of domestic violence, you no longer qualify for asylum. That is the rule as we are present day. And in fact, I have 3 individual cases with women who have suffered horrific domestic violence in their home countries. And at this point in time, there's very little we can do for them in that category. We have to be creative and sort of push the boundaries to sort of create alternate particular social groups for them.
So the idea that at least there might be some consistency and movement of law in a direction where you could, law and policy, where you could maybe be able to help these people is still in the future right now. It's going to take a while, even under the best of circumstances, to return to a more, and even then we've had problems with immigration law in this country preceding the Trump administration. So
that's absolutely correct, because just to put it into perspective, I have practiced as an immigration attorney under 5 different presidential administrations, beginning with President Clinton. And even prior to the Trump administration, President Obama had a record number of deportation and removals. in my area, and they referred to President Obama as the deporter in chief. So the idea that if you're a Democrat or a left of center, that you're going to be more liberal as far as the enforcement of immigration rules is concerned is not true. And what is refreshing and what makes me optimistic going forward is President Biden is the first president that we have seen propose immigration reform as part of his first 100-day agenda. That is remarkably unusual. The last time we had any significant major immigration reform was in 1986 under President Reagan. We have subsequently had incremental patchwork pieces of amnesty that qualify only certain particular groups of people, not something as broad as this. And it seems to be the case that historically, at least going back to the mid 80s, that the scope and the breadth of reform and amnesty has shrunken. So if someone, a year ago, before we knew the outcome of the election, if someone asked me for my prediction, I would have said that there's a decent chance that there'll be some type of legislation passed for dreamers. For everyone else, it seems unlikely. So the proposal that was put forth last week by Senator Menendez of New Jersey very much mirrors the Biden administration's wish list of items. But remember, we have to have 60 members of Congress because of the filibuster rules for that to go through. It looks like right now they're still talking about the COVID stimulus that's really occupying a lot of time. There's also they still need to confirm cabinet members. I'm not even sure if I know that Merrick Garland had his confirmation here. I'm not sure if they voted on him or not. So there's still a lot of working pieces that need to be put in place before we see any movement. I do see hope in that there's been a temporary freeze in terms of removals. There have been policy reversals as far as the asylum procedure is in place, where people were told to stay in Mexico before they could apply, contrary to US and international law. So there's been a number of good positive developments, but still our anticipation is that at some point, if we see any change in the law, it could be positive or negative, we at KIAC will be inundated with phone calls. We've already seen that in January. We started keeping track of the number of people calling us, and we had, double or 3 times the number of people calling, asking questions. We actually took on probably twice as many cases during that week than we normally traditionally do. And there's a certain ebb and flow to that in terms of clients coming in through the door and what we can do for them. But KIAC is a real well-known commodity within the community. One of the other services that we handle is we call them family services, but that ranges from helping people fill out forms for housing. We had a small fund in place where we granted people housing stipends because of COVID. A lot of our clients do work collecting brush in the forest, and they're often living 4 families to a household in Bremerton and don't have legal status to work. So we put together a toy drive. We have clothing drives. We give diapers away. We do food drives. We do what we can with what we have for our folks. And so what we have in place is a number of very dedicated volunteers. And most of our volunteers, we have many from Bainbridge Island. Most of them are seniors who have some time to devote to volunteer. And the level of volunteerism ranges from becoming a fully accredited rep, which is almost just shy of being an attorney, to helping answer phone calls. So I would encourage any of you who are interested in volunteering for a good cause. And what's wonderful for our accredited reps, what's so meaningful for them is they develop these relationships with these families. And you can watch the progress of these families from the time that someone, let's say, gets out of detention to the time that they get their green card and their children start to graduate from school and they open businesses. It's very rewarding. And it's one of the reasons why I agreed to join as a legal services director from private practice because of the dedication of our volunteers.
So can you talk a little bit about the kind of profile of individuals who have been working or are working as accredited reps?
Well, their backgrounds vary, but it's really just a function of time and willingness. We have an accredited rep program that we partner with the Catholic Legal Immigration Clinic. They're called Clinic. I forget what the acronym fully stands for, but if you decided you may have some interest in helping folks prepare naturalization applications or something as simple as a green card renewal, then we will train you and we will put you through or allow you to study through the clinic course so that you can familiarize yourself with terminology and procedures in place. At KIAC, we have a system where we have a system of mentorship where you will never be on your own as an accredited rep. There's always a second pair of eyes. I have a weekly meeting with the accredited reps where we will sit down via Zoom and talk about issues that people are seeing in their cases. But the volunteers for me are where the rubber meets the road as far as our services are concerned. And myself as a resource as well, having been in practice for several decades in immigration law, I can easily answer questions on the fly. It doesn't require a lot of research. I mean, I can just tell you what my experience has been. And oftentimes with immigration, it's not so much the substantive law as opposed to the procedural practice that is required to get someone's benefit through. And so we do have a lot of training available, and it's quite a nice community of volunteers. When we're in the office, there's a certain verve there. Everyone's working, people are coming in, there's babies running around, and we're all working. Everything's remote now. We wouldn't expect anyone to meet with someone in person unless they felt comfortable doing that. But it's really a wonderful sort of program for folks. And we're constantly in need of volunteers.
The email, if you want to learn more, is volunteer@Kitsap IAC, as in Kitsap Immigration Assistance Center.org.
And I'm happy to email you the name of our coordinator, Graciela. But if anyone has any time who's interested in volunteering, it could be something like driving someone to an appointment, or if you have Spanish speaking skills, or if you speak Mam, the old Mayan language. I'm sure we could find a place for you on either side of our house.
Great. I want to make sure that if people have questions, they have an opportunity, or comments, they have an opportunity to do so. Nancy had raised her hand, and it looks like you do have a comment, Nancy. Just be sure to unmute.
I have a question, Larry. Back when you were talking about Jeff Sessions overruling and establishing his own rule, which then made it the victims of domestic violence no longer eligible. Does a change like that at the federal level can it be undone by anyone other than the next Attorney General? Does it have to, in other words, if you make a change at the federal level, does the change of the change have to happen at the federal level?
I think it has to be done by the new Attorney General to withdraw the decision, because the issue has been litigated to say that, jurisdictionally that it wasn't proper, and all the courts have essentially held that to be true, that he does have that authority. So if you're interested in reading more about that decision, the case is called Matter of A-B, Matter of A-B. And it not only talks about victims of domestic violence, it also talks about folks who are resistant to joining a gang. So gang violence is a real issue, and I've had a couple of these cases myself. So there is a real problem with gangs in Central America. El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, parts of Mexico. The Mexican gangs are a different type of gang. It's more of a cartel, organized sort of cartel, whereas the gangs in the other Central American countries are a little bit more sort of extortionist and thieves more than. But for an individual who lives in those countries if you resist joining that gang, you will face very severe reprisal. They will threaten you, they will beat you, they will kill you, they will possibly rape you, and there's very little recourse in terms of getting help from the local authorities. So asking the police to help or the military, there's some corruption there, there's sort of some apathy there, and if you look at historically the issue of gangs, the gangs actually started in America. It's interesting because historically we had, if you go back to the 80s under the Reagan administration, we had this whole issue with Iran-Contra, we had a problem with the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, and we trained all these Contras to serve against them. And some of them had this training, and it's not to say that they were the only people who started gangs, but a lot of the gang members started in the United States first, and then committed crimes and got deported to Central America, where they started their gangs there. And then you have this sort of cycle of people coming from Central America to America, getting deported and back, and sort of reinfecting. I mean, it's kind of the way of the virus, the way it's sort of been transmitted. So the folks that, I mean, we really, I think from a policy point of view, we want to encourage people not to join a gang. We want to offer them protection if they had the wherewithal and the courage, quite frankly, to say no, because it's easier to just join and become a criminal and harass others and persecute others than it is to say no. So Matter of AB talks about that group of people as well.
Okay. And could you, is it what are the letters of the alphabet? Matters of
Alpha, beta, AB, capital A, capital A dash B, Matter of AB.
And to circle around about the Attorney General, I think that the Garland nomination is out of committee, but not voted on by the full Senate. So if we're waiting for a new Attorney General, we're still at this point waiting.
Yeah, and we don't know what his priorities will be. You know, obviously there's this amount of independence that he will exercise, and whether or not he will look at this as a pressing matter remains to be seen. Just historically, we know that Merrick Garland, when he sat on the circuit court in the District of Columbia, he was not a liberal by any means. So no promises or no, I mean, there's nothing that says that that's going to happen.
Right. He has become a little bit of a progressive banner, you know, whatever, because of the challenges politically with the Republicans in denying him a hearing. But I think his original choice by Obama was designed to try to win over Republican hearts and minds and try to get him through Congress. So that's a good point you make. The other thing that the executive director of KIAC wrote to me about, Sally Tellickson, was about tax support, and you mentioned that briefly. Can you talk at all about what kind of tax support you give, and whether there's a need for volunteers to help in that area as well?
Thank you for reminding me, Reed. So we did a significant number of federal tax filings in the past, which was primarily born on the back of one key volunteer. And the way KIAC has run previously is many of the staffed roles that we have now were filled by volunteers. And often these volunteers wore multiple hats. They were board members, they were bookkeepers, they were working in the legal department, they were fundraising, they were communications directors. And so that volunteer essentially retired from doing work for KIAC, which no one can blame her for all of the work that she's done. I mean, she's irreplaceable. And so we do have some other volunteers that still help with at least the state tax filings and the incorporations and, you know, payroll filings and things like that. And one of our volunteers has agreed to do a handful of federal tax filings going forward. But I think at last count, we had something like 30 or 40 folks who we had previously done their taxes for, who we were trying to find people to help them with their taxes. Now, it's a big portion of what we do in terms of casework, but we don't really have the capacity or the bandwidth to train people to become tax preparers. So if you have prior experience preparing taxes, whether as a CPA or as, for example, the AARP has a tax preparation program in place, which I don't know what's happening with it this year.
Well, it's taking place here at the Senior Center, and you can call us to get the phone number if you need to make an appointment with an AARP tax aid rep.
Okay.
Normally it's been at the library, but because the library, Kitsap Regional Library, are closed, the branches are closed, we have a large room with some ventilation, so they're using that space.
Wonderful. So that's another resource that we can refer clients to if they're unable to find someone to help them. And we have been fortunate enough in that we found a group of high school students in Tacoma called the Dreamers Tax Project. And I think one of the parents overseeing the organization is actually a CPA. And we connected with them, and we asked them whether they would help us with some of our clients, if we could provide some of the logistical support, such as setting up Zoom meetings from our offices, for example, because many of our clients don't have access to technology, nor do they speak English. So we could also provide translators and scanners and things that we take for granted, but for a low income client who doesn't speak English, it's very difficult. And so we've partnered with them to take on some cases, but it's wonderful to know that there is another resource available to them. So we will definitely add that to the list of referrals. So just a note about tax filings. Tax filings are important for lots of different reasons. It's your civic responsibility to pay taxes if you live in this country and you work in this country, regardless of your status here. But if we're looking long-term and we're looking at the proposed legalization, the Biden legalization, one of the requirements is that you file your taxes and make up your back taxes. And that's always been the case. There is a form of relief that you can request in immigration deportation proceedings called cancellation of removal. And part of the requirements to gain that form of relief is if you show you've paid taxes, and often back taxes. So there's a real sort of synergy in terms of benefits in filing your taxes as far as our clients are concerned. And we certainly want to encourage our clients to do what is not only civically correct, economically correct, and correct under the law.
Larry, I want to really thank you for taking the time today to update us and share with us the good work that you folks are doing. And I've learned a lot. I'm sure most of us have. And we will be happy to share the information about the kinds of assistance you need to help these people with our wider community.
I appreciate the opportunity, Reed. Thank you, everyone.